Our story's protagonist is a young man named Kazuya. On his way to the supermarket for groceries, he noticed a crowd of people fleeing in terror. It turned out the supermarket was under attack by a robber, causing everyone to scatter in chaos. However, two young women were so terrified that they could only cling to each other, too scared to run, seeing the robber charge toward them. Kazuya did not hesitate to use his own body to shield them. As a result, the two girls were unharmed, but Kazuya was gravely injured and passed away shortly after. In his final moments, his mind was filled with the sound of their mournful cries. He thought this was the end, but Kazuya's noble act earned him a second chance at life, reincarnated into the body of a young boy named Kane. After a week of being bedridden with a fever, Kane finally awoke. The maid was overjoyed, and his mother rushed to his side, checking to see if he still remembered who she was, but Kane was in a state of panic, unable to believe he had become a little boy, of only a few years old. Since Kane had been in bed for a week, they assumed he must be starving. Kane's mother and the maid stepped out to prepare some food for him. As Kane calmed down, he realized he had truly been reborn into a completely different world. He felt a sense of relief, thinking that the two girls were now safe. Kane was quite content. The only downside was that his new body was so small, and certain parts of his anatomy had shrunk accordingly. As the youngest son in a wealthy family, Kane was thoroughly pampered. Whether it was eating or resting, Kane was always attended to by this adorable maid. Kane's father was a margrave named Garm, who commanded an army and owned an entire forest teeming with monsters. He had two wives, and Kane's mother was his second. His first wife, Maria, had two sons with him as well, named Jin and Alex. In addition, Kane also had an older sister, 2 years his senior, named Ryan. Kane's family was astonished to see that, just after waking up, he could already write and do math. Kane even expressed a desire to learn everything about this new world, including its history and magic. Hearing this, Kane's father was incredibly proud to have such a brilliant son. However, Kane's sister mentioned that he was still too young and would have to wait till he was 5 for his baptism ceremony. Only then could he formally study and use magic like everyone else. But in truth, Kane could already use magic without ever having read a single book on the subject. In fact, Kane almost lost control of his magic and nearly burned down the entire house. Because of this, he always had to hide his abilities from those around him. His sister, Reine, knew that Kane was eager to explore the world outside. Every day she would come to Kane's room to teach him about the world's history. She told him that 300 years ago, a great adventurer of remarkable skill founded this kingdom and became its first king. Additionally, this land was home to various races like elves, beastmen, and dwarves. Before they knew it, 2 years had passed. Kane was now a 5-year-old boy, preparing for his baptism ceremony. Witnessing how much he had matured, his family was filled with happiness. A short while later, they boarded a carriage to head to the church together. Because Kane's father was a renowned margrave, they drew the attention of the townspeople wherever they went. At that moment, Kane asked his sister what magic in this world looked like. In response, she opened her status window for her little brother to see. Despite her young age, she could already use 3 types of magic. Furthermore, Ryan also possessed a divine blessing at level 2. This divine blessing was the very key to using magic in this world. The place where Kane was to be baptized was a grand church that worshipped all 7 pillar gods of this world. It was Kane's family's duty to inform the 7 gods that he had reached the age of 5. After that, they would pray to the gods for a successful baptism for him. Just then, the priest relayed Kane's family's message to the gods. Suddenly, a bright light appeared, and Kane was instantly summoned to their divine realm. For the past 2 years, the gods had been sitting there, waiting for his arrival. An old man seated in the middle, named Xenom, introduced himself as the creator of this world, and that he came from another world. Xenom then prompted the goddess of reincarnation, Lime, to explain the circumstances of his rebirth. It turned out Kazuya's demise was not part of her plan. According to Lem's arrangements, the supermarket robber was supposed to trip and fall, allowing bystanders to apprehend him, but for some reason, Kane had insisted on shielding the 2 girls, which led to him being reincarnated. Hearing this, Kane was deeply embarrassed, realizing his courageous act had been entirely unnecessary. But Lime still encouraged Kane, telling him he had done a very good deed. Sometime later, the god of Earth asked her to reincarnate him into this world. Furthermore, Lime had preserved Kane's memories so that he could easily master magic and live with a happy family. Kane then expressed his gratitude to the gods for their wholehearted support. In return, The gods introduced themselves and decided to bestow upon Cain numerous blessings. They then told Cain to check his status when he returned home and bid him farewell. Cain was then sent back to the mortal world. Since this was the first time the statues of the gods had ever glowed, Cain's father suspected he had received many blessings. He then asked Cain to open his status window for everyone to see. However, Cain wanted to keep his abilities a secret, so he feigned a stomach and ran off to check it in private. When Cain opened it, he saw that all of his power stats had jumped to level 10. According to his father, level 5 was considered the highest in this world. He could not understand why the gods had granted him such an overwhelming amount of power. Fortunately, Cain had not shown it to anyone. If he had, they likely would have fainted from shock. Following the creator god's advice, he realized he could use magic to conceal his stats. With a simple wave of his hand, Cain hid all his stats from view. Right after the baptism, Cain's family threw a party to celebrate. Not wanting to keep everyone waiting, Cain's father prompted him to open his status window for the family to see. Cain, believing he had hidden everything, confidently revealed it. When his family saw it, their jaws dropped. Every single one of his stats was off the charts, and he even had the blessings of all 7 gods. Cain himself was speechless. He thought he had concealed a lot, but he had clearly missed some things. His father became very concerned and instructed him not to reveal his status to anyone. His power was so great it could be seen as a threat to the nation, which could easily lead to being monitored by the royal court. Although Cain's father was worried, Cain himself remained carefree. Later, Cain took out a summoning book to test his new blessings. Though he shouted the incantation for a stuffed animal, the result was a massive monster. Upon seeing it, his sister and a young beast girl were absolutely terrified. The situation reminded Cain of the time he saved the 2 girls at the supermarket. Without a second thought for the danger, he rushed forward, using his magic to take down the monster. Afterward, Cain collapsed, leading the 2 girls to think he had not made it. Seeing their tears, Cain himself feared he would not pull through. However, Cain got back on his feet moments later, his wounds already completely healed. Seeing his sister's worried face, Cain apologized to her. He felt a surge of happiness, realizing that even in this world, he could still save people, just like he did in his old one. The next morning, Cain had his official debut before the members of his clan. Now that he was 5, in front of everyone, Cain declared his ambition to one day become an adventurer, so he could travel to many places around the world, make many new friends, and use his strength to help everyone. But to achieve this, Cain would have to study many things. Therefore, Cain's father decided to arrange for tutors for him. Cain eagerly anticipated what his new tutors would be like. When he saw them arrive, Cain leapt down from the upper floor to welcome them. It turned out to be 2 young women, the tutors his father had hired to teach him. The rather shy, red-haired girl was named Millie, while the blue-haired elf girl was named Nina. Their task, assigned by his father, was to train Cain for the next 3 years. The first lesson Cain learned from his 2 masters was swordsmanship, but seeing Cain's swordsmanship was already so advanced, Millie wanted to test her skills against him. Remarkably, despite being only 5 years old, he was already fighting on par with her. As for Nina, she speculated that the god of war must have blessed Cain, allowing him to move with such skill. After a while of sparring, Millie's arm grew tired, so she asked Nina to take her place. Nina introduced herself as a mage, blessed by the god of magic with a level 3 aptitude. But for someone at level 10 like Cain, he did not even need to chant to effortlessly cast fire magic, along with a few other elemental spells. Both Nina and Millie were astounded by this display, hardly believing their eyes. They began to wonder what they could possibly teach Cain anymore. It seemed the boy was already a genius. Noticing his tutor's apparent dismay, he invited them to go outside to practice, suggesting it as a field trip. After all, since his baptism, Cain had not been allowed to leave the palace grounds. But first, the 3 of them had to go to Cain's father to ask for his permission. When the Margrave asked for their reason, Nina explained that if they continued to let Cain practice there, he would soon wreck the entire palace. His mother found this rather amusing, and his father also agreed to let them go outside, on the condition that all 3 returned to the city before sunset. Once outside, Cain felt a rush of joy. He never imagined the world beyond the palace walls could be so beautiful and adventurous. Once they felt they had traveled far enough, the group stopped at a large rock to begin their training, and with just a single fire spell, Cain vaporized the rock, leaving a vast area of destruction in its wake. Despite using such a large amount of magic, he did not show the slightest sign of fatigue. This left both of his tutors even more astonished by his power. But then, they sensed something approaching. It was a killer rabbit, a dangerous monster known for attacking humans. It ignored the two girls and charged straight for Cain. But the young boy simply dodged lightly and unleashed a wind spell to defeat the rabbit. Afterward, he placed the rabbit in his item box to show off to his sister later. Seeing Cain's handy item box, Millie mentioned that she wanted to buy an item bag too once she saved up enough money. Since it was still early, Millie suggested they hunt a few more creatures. Nina used a detection spell to search for nearby monsters. Intrigued, Cain asked Nina how to cast this type of magic, and when he tried it himself, he easily detected several rabbits from a great distance away. Although this was Cain's first time casting the spell, they were no longer surprised by his rapid learning. Afterward, the three of them took down many more killer rabbits. Cain let one get away and was about to chase it into the forest, but Millie quickly stopped him, warning that it was full of dangerous monsters. She explained that every few decades, the monsters would break out and attack the human settlements, which is why the city walls were reinforced to keep them away. Upon hearing this, Cain became even more determined to become an adventurer, to protect the people. That evening, Cain was surprised to find that just by dealing with a few small rabbits, he had already leveled up several times. He could not understand why the gods kept giving him so much power when all he wanted was to be a normal adventurer, nothing more. At this rate, the royal court would surely come looking for him sooner or later. He sighed, thinking about those troublesome gods. The next morning, his two tutors took Cain to the Adventurers Guild to accept a quest. As soon as he heard the words Adventurers Guild, Cain was overjoyed at the thought of finally becoming a real adventurer, tired of dealing with killer rabbits. Millie asked the receptionist to find them a different type of monster, something that would allow Cain to fully unleash his skills and dispatch them. Just then, an adventurer appeared out of nowhere and approached Millie's group. Since he was one rank higher than Millie, he demanded she buy him a drink, but interjected, saying they were busy with a quest and had no time. In response, this nuisance had his men restrain both of the girls. Seeing this, Cain told him to stop at once, but the man would not listen. With a flick of his wrist, Cain sent the man sprawling. The adventurer was furious, but he could not do anything to Cain, who effortlessly knocked him down again and again. Finally, he drew his sword to attack the boy, much to the two girls' alarm, but Cain easily dodged while giving him a chance to apologize to his two tutors. When the man remained stubborn, Cain sent him flying out of the building. His two cronies, seeing their leader get humiliated, were still unafraid. Cain charged forward and sent them flying outside as well. Once it was over, Nina hugged Cain, deeply moved that he had not abandoned her. The three of them then headed towards the forest to continue their magic practice. In the blink of an eye, the 3-year period had passed, and Cain was now an 8-year-old boy. He felt that he could not hold his two tutors back any longer. Before they parted ways, he wanted to give them both a meaningful parting gift. Cain remembered that before, the two girls had really wanted a magic bag to carry their things. He decided to teleport to the monster forest. Once there, he began to subdue large creatures one by one to gather materials for the bags. Over at the city gate, a guard noticed a disturbance in the forest and thought a monster attack was imminent. He immediately sounded the warning bell, sending the citizens into a panic. Margrave Garm immediately led his troops to the edge of the forest to intercept the monsters. Meanwhile, Cain had gathered enough materials and teleported straight home. As for the Margrave, when he and his troops arrived, they found only a massive crater with not a single monster in sight. Then, spotted the scarf that Cain often wore, left behind at the scene. At that moment, the Margrave realized the culprit was his own troublemaking son. The next day, the three of them went out to handle monsters as usual. Since it was their last day with Cain, Nina was feeling a little down. Cain then thanked them both for being by his side and teaching him for the past 3 years. Before parting, he gave each of the girls a magic bag that he had made himself. The materials were personally gathered by him from hunting monsters in the forest, which he then revealed. This left them speechless, as the materials were from fearsome beasts that no one else dared to approach. Furthermore, one bag was large enough to hold an entire mansion, while Millie's could hold 2 carriages. The girls regarded them as national treasures, and worried that someone might try to steal them. But Cain reassured them not to worry. He explained that if anyone else tried to pick up the bag, it would automatically expand and crush them. Hearing this, they realized this was truly a gift filled with their students' affection. In return, the 2 girls gave Cain a simultaneous kiss, leaving him completely flustered. They then reminded Cain that if he ever needed help in the future, they would come to his aid whenever he wanted. And with that, the tutoring contract between Cain and the two girls came to an end. After 3 years, Cain returned home only to be scolded by his old man. Cain had to apologize and promise never to enter the forest again, but despite his promise, the very next day, Cain was out dealing with monsters again. Because Cain was so powerful, it was not long before a massive dragon was lying defeated before him. When he checked his status, Cain was startled to see his magic had increased immensely, and he had earned the new title of Dragon Slayer. Before he knew it, another 2 years had passed. Cain was now 10 years old, and on his way to the capital to attend a royal debutante ball. His sister was now 12, and preparing to enroll in the Royal Academy. Just then, Cain sensed that up ahead, a group of 10 monsters was surrounding a group of people. His father, hearing this, sent 2 guards ahead to help them, but Cain found the guards to be too slow, so he jumped out of the carriage and rushed ahead himself. By the time he arrived, the ferocious monsters had already dispatched the guards and were surrounding the carriage. Just as one charged forward to attack, Cain appeared just in time and took it out with a single wave of his hand. The ones behind it were also quickly neutralized by him. Cain then drew his sword and took down 2 more. As for the pack leader, Cain leaped high into the air and used his flaming sword to blast it away. Seeing Cain's overwhelming strength, the remaining guards became wary, fearing he might be an enemy. Cain quickly introduced himself as the 3rd son of Margrave Garm. Seeing the guards were exhausted, Cain used healing magic to restore their strength. As their wounds miraculously healed, they asked Cain who he was to be so powerful. At that moment, his father's carriage finally arrived. As soon as he stepped out, he saw that Cain had already resolved the entire situation. Suddenly, the door of the other carriage opened, causing both Cain and his father to kneel. It turned out the 2 people in the carriage were Her Highness the Princess and the daughter of a duke. They thanked Cain and his father for their timely assistance. However, the princess was still suffering from the psychological shock of the monster attack. Cain requested permission to use his magic to calm her spirits. Thanks to Cain's spell, all their anxiety and fatigue vanished, leaving the 2 girls feeling as light as a feather. They felt as if they had fallen into Cain's web of charm. The 2 girls immediately changed their way of addressing him, and then began to vie for Cain's attention, as if each one wanted him for herself. And when they learned that Cain was also on his way to the capital, the 2 girls insisted he ride in their carriage with them. His father could only remain kneeling, at a complete loss for words. Inside the carriage, though it was quite spacious, both girls pressed close to Cain. Even though he wanted to move to another seat for more room, neither of them would let him go. Just then, the 2 girls suggested to Cain that they call each other by their first names to be more familiar. They were Princess Telestia and Lady Silk. Cain did not dare to argue with Her Highness the Princess, so he ended up agreeing, albeit nervously. Afterward, a guard came to inform Cain that they were approaching the city of Renoma ahead. This would be where they would rest for the night, before continuing their journey to the capital the next morning. Cain had assumed that upon arriving, everyone would go their separate ways, but as it turned out, the 2 girls clung to Cain, refusing to leave his side and demanding to sleep with him that night. His father, seeing this, protested that Cain was only 10 years old and not yet a man, pleading with them to spare his son. But the 2 girls used the excuse of staying by Cain's side so he could protect them at all times, leaving his father utterly defeated. He could only advise Cain to take care of his health and not to lose his self-control. Upon entering the room, 3 beds had been arranged very close together, but feeling this still was not close enough, they pushed the beds together and made Cain lie in the middle. Then, the 2 girls invited him to do some exercises. Before going to sleep, they used the excuse that they were afraid of monster attacks and wanted to be closer to Cain. After refusing to no avail, Cain was forced to agree. As a result, Cain did not get a wink of sleep that entire night. When he set out the next morning, the dark circles under his eyes were worse than a panda's, and for the following nights, not a single one did the 2 girls let Cain sleep in peace. But after several days of travel, they finally arrived at the capital. Upon entering the royal palace, Cain was still being eagerly followed by the 2 girls. The person who greeted them was the vice-captain of the royal knights, Graf. He thanked Cain for protecting Her Highness the Princess, and for bringing the fallen soldiers back to the capital. Cain reported that they had all fought bravely against 50 orcs. Graf promised to commend them and send messages to their families, but the one who deserved the most credit was still Cain. Graf asked him to stay for an audience with the king. Cain was then escorted to the palace, and upon learning that Cain was just a young boy, everyone stared at him intently. But when he was brought before the king, he was praised profusely for single-handedly rescuing the princess and the duke's daughter. Silk. Cain was granted the title of Baron, along with a reward of 100 silver coins and a mansion. Hearing this, some of the royal court members felt a surge of jealousy towards the 10-year-old boy. One of them even dared to argue with His Majesty, but when the king asked if he knew how to take down monsters, he fell silent. As for Cain, unable to refuse His Majesty, graciously accepted the reward, but he was not yet permitted to leave. He had to go to the king's reception room. After leading the two young ladies inside, the king began to speak. He was deeply grateful to Cain for risking his life to save the princess. Lady Silk's father also expressed his thanks, which made Cain feel a bit awkward. The two of them then made a proposition. They wanted Cain to be betrothed to both girls, with the intention of marrying them when they came of age. Since he had been so intimately cared for by the two ladies, to the point of sharing a bed, it was now time for him to take responsibility. Although Cain knew that nothing had actually happened that night, not even a little, faced with two such stern expressions, even if offered more money, he would not have dared to refuse. Even Cain's own father could not say a word to help him. Therefore, Cain accepted the king's request, agreeing to be engaged to both the princess and the duke's daughter. When he returned home, Cain was interrogated by everyone for getting involved with both girls, because Cain's power was so overwhelming. He had recently encountered many strange situations. He went to the church to meet with the gods again to seek their advice about his abilities. They acknowledged that Cain was now the strongest person alive, which might make his life a bit dull. The creator god suggested that Cain use his knowledge from his previous life to create new games for this world. Cain found this to be a reasonable idea and decided to get right to it. However, he then had to take his sister shopping, preventing him from starting his project. While out, Cain coincidentally ran into his childhood friend, Parma. Parma was currently working as a helper at a shop owned by a man named Timanus. Knowing that Timanus was a skilled craftsman, Cain asked him to make a game for him. It was a highly intellectual game from Cain's old world called Reversi. Finding it quite interesting and easy to play, the shop owner immediately agreed, and to provide capital for the craftsman, Cain gave him a whole gold coin up front. Cain then said goodbye to the shop owner and left. As soon as he stepped outside, he found his sister looking furious because Cain had disappeared. She had no idea when he had slipped away. Afterward, Cain had to appease his sister by admiring every outfit that she had bought. The next morning, Cain received a message from a maid that Timanus was inviting him to the shop. When he arrived, Cain was very surprised that the shop owner had managed to create such a precise game board. Cain and Parma played a test game to try it out. Seeing how well the two played, the shop owner realized that this Reversi game would become very popular. Cain then suggested that the shop owner create two types of Reversi boards, one for nobles and one for commoners, each with a different price. He recommended producing an initial batch of over 1,000 boards, with more to be made if needed. However, Timanus lamented that he was out of capital and could not produce so many. In response, Cain tossed out 5 gold coins. The shop owner was ecstatic and vowed to do his absolute best, but first, they had to draw up a contract and present the game board to the god of commerce for his approval. Then, they would swear an oath to him, pledging that the two of them would create the highest quality products. After the shop owner recited the oath, the game board was transported directly to the god of commerce. This was a sign that the two had sealed their contract with the god of commerce. The time was drawing near for the two of them to focus on crafting the game boards. Cain also remembered to ask the shop owner to make an extra luxurious set to gift to the king. Meanwhile, the gods were overjoyed with Cain's new toy. Cain later returned home, and suddenly remembered he had forgotten about the royal debutant ball. Since Cain had become a baron, his father told him that he would be the center of attention at the ball, but Cain was confident that this time, he would handle himself tactfully, which surprised his father. He could not believe his son was only a 10-year-old boy. Cain's family subsequently attended the royal debutant party. There, Cain recognized the half-baked noble who had opposed him before, along with his 2 sons, who were not much different from him. Cain then met Lady Silk and her father again. Since they had not had a chance to properly introduce themselves last time, Cain carefully greeted him this time. However, this man still remembered the incident with Cain and his daughter, and his expression was enough to make even Cain feel intimidated. Lady Silk then introduced herself fully to Cain. Following social etiquette, Cain offered a compliment, saying the dress she was wearing was very beautiful. This made the young lady very happy. Her father, however, noted that Cain, at only 10 years old, already knew how to flirt with girls. His own father thought so too. So Cain had to quickly explain that he was just used to complimenting his sister, so it had become a habit to compliment everyone he met. At that moment, the royal family appeared before the nobles, and after the king's speech, They raised their glasses to toast the kingdom. It was then Cain's family's turn to greet the king, and just like before, Cain complimented the princess, saying she was as beautiful as a goddess. This made her feel absolutely ecstatic, having become a goddess in Cain's eyes. The king, on the other hand, was speechless that Margrave Garm had raised such a smooth-talking son. Cain then presented the reversi board to the king, which he and the shop owner, Tamanus, had created. However, the king still remembered Cain's flirtatious words and told him to come to the reception room after the party to be reprimanded. Cain's father praised him for his ingenuity in creating toys to earn money. He then bid Cain farewell, leaving him to mingle and make friends on his own. Just then, Lady Silk arrived and invited Cain to a private place to talk. Since it had been a while since she was last alone with Cain, she took this opportunity to press him against a wall for a kiss. Just as they were about to get started, some nobles came over to greet them. This annoyed Silk greatly, and she did not even bother to speak to them. Cain, however, following royal etiquette, still had to greet the three nobles. But they looked down on Cain's family, considering them of low status, not worthy of their company. However, Cain was not the least bit afraid of them. He demanded that they apologize for upsetting Lady Silk. The leader refused and challenged Cain to a group fight outside. When they went outside, Silk clung to Cain, not leaving his side, which annoyed the three nobles. The leader then threatened Cain, boasting that his two companions were divinely protected and could use magic, but because he had not studied, this guy had even forgotten how to cast a spell. Only after pulling out a book did he manage to chant some incantation. He then summoned lightning to the ground, which looked rather impressive, but in the end, he only managed to produce a tiny flame, causing Cain and the princess to burst out laughing. The next guy followed suit, chanting the exact same incantation, and also managed to summon lightning. But he was not much different from the first guy. He only managed to throw a few stones that flew as slow as a turtle. At this point, Lady Silk had had enough. She told them to stop this nonsense immediately. She then informed them that Cain had been granted the title of Baron by the king. This terrified them, forcing them to kneel before him and apologize profusely. Afterward, they retreated, looking utterly pathetic. After they left, the lady invited Cain to go on a little date for fun, but just then, the princess arrived. So Cain had to cover the lady's mouth to stop her from talking. And when she learned that the two were about to go on a date, the princess became very jealous. To appease the princess, Cain had to compliment her beauty and promise to go on a date with her next time, but the king had been standing behind his daughter the whole time. Catching Cain in the act of asking the princess out on a date, he then invited him back to the reception room for a chat. The two fathers were well aware that Cain was very good at charming their daughters. They had to give Cain a warning beforehand, otherwise he would go off and flirt with other girls. The next day, Cain was given the key to his own private mansion. Seeing Cain, the king immediately demanded to play a game of reversi with him. Everyone had to stop him. Cain thought he had been spared. He was about to leave when Silk's father brought a game board over to invite him to play. What is more, several of the king's retainers were also lining up to play with him. It was quite a while before Cain was finally let go, and he immediately headed to his new mansion. He had imagined the mansion to be very luxurious, but it turned out to be quite rundown. When Cain opened the door to go inside, the house was covered in dust. Cobwebs were strung up everywhere. It looked like it had not been inhabited for years, but to Cain, that did not matter. With just a single spell, the entire mansion was as good as new. Cain was overjoyed, thinking that this would soon be his very own home. The maid, Sylvia, also brought along a butler and many other maids to look after the house for Cain. This new butler seemed to greatly admire Cain for all the feats he had accomplished. The maids then split up to clean the mansion. However, Cain had already cleaned everything with his magic, so now, all they had to do was arrange the furniture in the mansion, and they would be done. Just then, the butler reminded him that he should visit his family, as his brothers were also there. Cain's brothers greatly admired him, as he had been granted a title by the king at only 10 years old. Cain's sister, meanwhile, was eager to see his new house and what it was like. Cain then brought his whole family to his mansion. Just a few days ago, it had been completely run down, but now it was sparkling clean. The whole family concluded that only Cain could have cleaned it so quickly. After touring all the rooms, his father seemed not quite satisfied. As a nobleman, he wanted some kind of artwork hanging in the house. In response, Cain said that he had already prepared everything. When they went downstairs, the whole family was shocked. Cain's artwork was a mounted specimen of a fire dragon. Even Cain's father could not hide his fear. Asking where on earth he had gotten it, Cain then had to admit to his father that 2 years ago, he had snuck out of the house to take down this dragon. His father, realizing he could not stop his son anymore, simply told him to explain it to everyone around them so they would be less afraid. But on second thought, he admitted that placing the dragon there was actually a very good idea. The next thing that surprised them was Cain's toilet. When his mother sat down, a jet of water sprayed up, sending her into a state of pure bliss. His father did not believe it, so his mother told him to sit down and try it for himself, and he too shouted with delight upon experiencing this divine toilet. He immediately asked Cain to install them for the whole family, as everyone loved it so much. Afterward, Cain's father reminded him that he would have to prepare a party to celebrate his new house with the nobility. The butler, thinking quickly, had already prepared a guest list for him, but on it was the name of that detestable Marquis from before, which made Cain worried. However, the maid Sylvia encouraged him, telling Cain to just be hospitable to everyone. There was no need to be elaborate. As for the king, Cain had not dared to invite him yet. His position was the highest in the land. The next day, Cain and his servants prepared gifts for the attendees. Then, they prepared all the food and drinks, like wine and meat. The maid Sylvia, when she tasted the food, declared the steaks and hamburgers absolutely delicious, and the wine, she said, paired perfectly with the meat. Since Cain was too young to drink alcohol, he had asked her to test if the wine he made was any good. The result was that Sylvia drank 3 whole bottles and still wanted more. Just then, he received a summons from the king. When he arrived, Cain was reprimanded by him for not receiving an invitation, especially since he was his father-in-law. Fortunately, Cain had listened to his butler's advice and prepared an invitation in advance. The king, afterward, was very pleased and showed it off to everyone around him. Cain's maids were very surprised that he had even managed to invite the king. Cain had to admit to them that the king had accepted him as his son-in-law, and that evening, the housewarming party took place. The first to arrive at the party were Lady Silk and her father. When they saw the fire dragon, they were in awe. The butler then reminded Cain to go to the main hall to greet his guests. After Cain's announcement, the guests raised their glasses to congratulate him, and the delicious wine earned praise from everyone. Furthermore, Dukrak also complimented Cain, saying he knew how to win over a girl's stomach. Truly, a master of charm. That Cain, shortly after, the royal family also arrived at the party to congratulate Cain. Since he was late, the king told everyone to enjoy themselves and not to mind him. But when he tasted Cain's delicious wine, he shouted out loud because it was so good. Moreover, the hamburger was simply divine, beyond description. Princess Telestia also praised the food as delicious. As for the queen, she had already tried his divine toilet. She told the king to go try it for himself. After relieving himself, he immediately ordered Cain to start installing the toilets throughout the royal palace the next day. And as for Cain's hospitality that day, the king was very pleased. King praised Cain in front of the many nobles present. As for the wretched Marquis, he had just arrived and was acting extremely arrogant, but when he stepped inside, he was scared out of his wits, confronted by a giant fire dragon. Cain had to tell him it was a model before the man dared to enter the mansion for the meal. The other nobles, seeing his attitude, were at a loss for words, and this guy, despite drinking the delicious wine, still had the audacity to complain. He ate hamburger after hamburger but still complained that it was terrible. This made Cain extremely annoyed, but because his rank was Marquis, he had to endure it. A moment later, Cain gave him some glasses as a gift for those who came to congratulate him. However, this man demanded dozens of glasses, along with demanding that Cain give him the recipes for the food and wine. But because this man was too greedy, the king appeared and told him that he would get nothing. He could not believe that a Marquis like him could be so greedy and arrogant. The king threatened him, saying that if he acted like that again, he would be stripped of his title. The man, now afraid, retreated with a look of utter humiliation. The princess, seeing this, realized that Cain had arranged everything to trap the Marquis, and the king, overhearing this, punished Cain for daring to use him. The next morning, Cain went to the vice-captain of the guard to ask for a favor. It turned out Cain wanted to sell the pile of monster materials that he had hunted. The vice-captain took Cain to a room for storing monsters, but Cain said it was too small, because the monsters that Cain had hunted were all huge, like earth dragons. The vice-captain, hearing this, was startled, because those were monsters that only a rank adventurers could handle. Cain then went outside with the vice-captain to show off his spoils, and when he saw the pile of monsters, the vice-captain was speechless. Not knowing what to say, he wondered if Cain was a hero or a messenger of the gods, because no ordinary person could be so powerful. Seeing Cain about to leave, the vice-captain invited him to stay and watch the knights train. What is more, the captain also really wanted to meet Cain, having heard rumors that he was very strong. Cain was then introduced to the royal knights by the vice-captain. Some of them, seeing that Cain was only 10 years old, thought he was nothing more than a child. The vice-captain arranged for the two to exchange a few moves to see for themselves, and in just a few seconds, Cain sent the man's wooden sword flying from his hand. This caused the man to immediately surrender, not daring to face him anymore. Cain did not want to fight anymore either. However, the vice-captain then had him fight against 30 men, but before the match could begin, the captain called for everyone to stop. She jumped down from above and scolded the whole group of knights for having no self-respect, ganging up on a child. She then hugged Cain and asked the vice-captain why he had not stopped them. But when she heard from the vice-captain that Cain had taken down 30 orcs, she flew into a rage and wanted to challenge him herself. The vice-captain advised her to introduce herself to Cain before fighting, but the captain wanted to beat Cain to a pulp first and then introduce herself, and although Cain was only using a wooden sword, he still fought on par with the woman known as the Sword Saint. Their speed and skill were evenly matched, leaving the onlookers even more amazed. The captain, for her part, was overjoyed. It had been a long time since she had found a worthy opponent, but just then Cain suddenly increased his speed, circled behind the captain, and pointed his sword at her. The captain, upon being defeated, was deeply moved, as if she were about to cry. She then suddenly hugged Cain and declared that she would marry him right then and there, but Cain immediately refused, saying that he was only 10 years old. The captain then introduced herself as Tefana, and a viscountess, since Tefana was an elf and could live up to 300 years. Cain did not need to worry about the age difference, but Cain said that he needed to consult with everyone first. Tefana found this reasonable. She wanted to go directly to the king to ask for his opinion. She then dragged Cain along to have an audience with the king. Before the king, Tefana declared that she would marry Cain, leaving the king and his father with their jaws agape. Not understanding what was happening, Cain had to recount the story of how he had defeated Tefana and how she had claimed him as her husband. Just then, his father and the king told him about Tefana's background. She came from the land of Reincarnated, the homeland of the beautiful elves. According to the first king's will, humans and elves were to be treated as equals, and although Reincarnated was a territory of this kingdom, they still governed themselves as an independent nation. If Cain were to marry Tefana, it would be like marrying a princess from another country. But the king then informed Tefana that Cain was already engaged to the princess and the duke's daughter, and advised her to reconsider. Thinking Tefana would give up, it turned out she fell even more in love with Cain. She then said she would write a letter to her father to ask for his permission to marry. This left the king and the others there at a complete loss for words with this couple. After they left, the king wondered how Tefana, the strongest knight in the kingdom, could be so easily defeated by Cain. Not only that, the boy had also easily taken down a fire dragon, as well as other dragons. He felt that there was something not quite right about Cain's power, so the king decided that he would soon bring out the royal family's magic grimoire to test. From then on, Cain was asked out on dates by Tefana every day, but these dates were actually intense sword-fighting spars, which left him completely exhausted. Just when he thought he could finally rest, he was dragged by the vice-captain to see the king. That moment, Cain could feel that the atmosphere was very tense. The king then had someone bring out the royal family's magic grimoire for him to see. It was a book written by the first king for all of humanity, which greatly intrigued Cain. He opened it and could easily read every line of text about magic within the book. This was a book that no one else could read because it was written in Japanese. The king immediately asked Cain who he really was and where he came from. At this point, Cain thought back to the person who wrote this book, the first king, who also had a Japanese name. He was certain that he, too, was a reincarnated person like himself. But first, Cain had to tell everyone about his own identity. In front of everyone, Cain admitted that he had memories of a past life, and that both he and the first king came from a country called Japan. At the age of 5, Cain had also met the 7 gods during his baptism ceremony. Everyone around him was astonished to hear this, that he had met the gods themselves. They then asked Cain to open his status window for everyone to see, and when Cain revealed it, everyone's jaws dropped even further. All the stats were sky high. plus the title Apostle of the Gods. The king immediately thought that if Cain held that title, then he should be the one to rule this country. But Cain himself did not want that. When he was first reincarnated here, Cain knew nothing about this world. It was thanks to the help of his parents and those close to him that Cain had become who he was today. It was through meeting the princess and the lady that he was granted his title by the king. Therefore, Cain was very grateful to his father for being his son, and he apologized to the king for hiding everything from him. However, he only wanted to be Cain, as he was now, and had no desire to be a king. Although Cain had said his piece, the king paid no mind and still insisted that he become king. Just as tensions were rising, Tefana burst, showing off the marriage license that her father had approved. Tefana then asked for everyone's permission to take Cain outside for a sword fight. At this point, all the questions in the king's mind had been answered. He was at ease, and he hoped that Cain would use his strength to protect his loved ones as well as the citizens of this kingdom. The news of Cain taking a new wife soon reached the princess and the lady, but before they could question him, Cain was dragged away on a date by Captain Tefana. Cain had to explain that dating in this context simply meant going for a sword fight. Cain was later allowed to carefully read the book of the first king. It stated that he was Japanese and was also reincarnated here after his time ended in his old world. However, he had retained his original form, unlike Cain, who had become a child. Just then, the princess and the lady arrived to invite Cain out, but he had to make an excuse to get away because today he had something very important to do. However, just as he escaped the two girls, Tefana appeared out of nowhere. She invited Cain to go training outside the capital the next day. This time, Cain also apologized to Tefana and said he would make it up to her another time, because today was the day that Cain officially turned 12 years old and would become a true adventurer. A little later, Cain went to the Adventurers Guild to register as a rookie. There, he met a rather strong adventurer named Claude. His red hair looked very familiar, but Cain could not remember where he had seen him before. He then approached the receptionist, Lydia, to register. After filling out the application, he had to put a drop of blood on a crystal ball to store his magical signature. At the Adventurers Guild, Cain would start his adventuring career at the lowest rank, G rank. He suddenly remembered that his two former tutors were D rank. He wondered where they were now. Seeing that Cain was very young, the receptionist reminded him to always do his best and to cherish his life. Just then, some other adventurers came over to bother Lisha. Cain thought to himself how these guys always show up at the perfect moment. This time, Cain dodged out of the way, letting the men fight among themselves, not wanting to get involved. When they saw they could not land a hit on Cain, their leader was about to draw his sword to deal with him. But the red-haired man from before returned and intimidated the troublemakers, sending them running. Having been helped, Cain bowed his head and thanked him. Claude, also seeing that Cain was very strong, took the initiative to get acquainted with him. Claude said he was very impressed with Cain's dodging skills. From earlier, he must have trained a lot to become so good. Cain said he had been training since he was a child and was also taught by an adventurer tutor. Cain then asked about Claude's party. He told Cain that his party was called the Ice Flames because Claude's weapon was a flaming sword, while his wife used ice magic. Currently, Claude was a rank and had a gold guild card, but a rank was not the highest. That would be S rank. Those who reached this rank would have a black card, which looked pretty cool while he was boosting. Claude's wife arrived and bonked him on the head. She then told Claude to hurry up and accept a quest instead of just sitting around drinking. But Cain explained that Claude had just saved him, which calmed the woman down. Seeing that Cain was a rather cute boy, she told him that if anyone bullied him, he should just call for her. When Claude tried to keep drinking, she pinched his ear and dragged him outside. It seems defying the wife is an unforgivable crime. Cain then went to accept a few quests to complete and rank up. He was very excited to see a quest called Goblin Subjugation in the Eastern Forest. As he eagerly grabbed the quest sheet, he ran right into Tefana. When she learned that her husband wanted to go take care of monsters, Tefana demanded to go with him. The vice captain, hearing this, tried to stop her because they had a night training session, but Tefana delegated all her duties to the vice captain so she could set out with her future husband. Tefana was overjoyed to be alone with Cain. She saw it as a romantic date. Even though their mission was to neutralize a horde of monsters using his magic detection, Cain sensed they were just ahead. When they arrived, the two saw that a food cart had been destroyed, and up ahead, a person was surrounded by monsters. The two of them immediately rushed forward. Cain healed the injured person, while Tefana raised her sword to cut down the goblins one by one. Many had fallen, but their numbers were still too great. Cain used his magic to enhance her strength. Having received her husband's love, Tefana was invigorated and charged in to wipe out the remaining goblins. As for the leader, she finished it with a single stroke, as if she were cutting a cake, a wedding cake. And so, the wedding in Tefana's imagination took place, making her very happy. But there were still several lizard monsters in front of them. Cain asked Tefana to lead the person to safety, while he would stay behind and cast a series of spells to clear out all the monsters. Cain's battlefield had turned into a massive crater, leaving Millie and Anna to wonder what on earth had just happened there. Cain then returned to the Adventurers Guild to report that he had also taken care of several lizardmen. This surprised Licia, as lizardmen were a very strong species, and not just anyone could defeat them, let alone a group of 30. She hurried off to report to her boss. Cain was invited to the office to meet Licia's boss. The man accused him of cheating to be able to take down the lizardmen. No matter how much Licia tried to explain on Cain's behalf, the man refused to listen. In fact, he even threatened to revoke his adventurer's card. Cain could not believe that on his very first day as an adventurer, he was already being kicked out. But just then, the guild master arrived. Having heard the commotion in the room, this man was Tefana's older brother, and also the master of the Adventurers Guild. However, the old man still did not believe that Cain could take down the lizardmen. The guild master called for Tefana, and immediately, she ran over to hug her future husband first, afraid he would run away. Seeing the captain of the knights claim Cain as her husband, everyone there was extremely surprised. The guild master then informed the man that this young boy, Cain, was, in fact, a baron. Previously, he had taken down monsters to save the princess and a noble lady, because he wanted to be an adventurer, was only pretending to be a commoner. And after marrying Tefana, Cain would officially become the guild master's brother-in-law. Hearing this, the man realized the gravity of his mistake and immediately knelt down to apologize to him. The guild master, as compensation for Cain, decided to promote him to C rank on the spot. But Tefana, while hugging Cain, said that C rank was still not enough because, since the age of 10, her husband had been able to take down fire dragons. With such overwhelming power, the guild master decided to promote Cain straight to a rank. For convenience, he then told the other two to quickly process his promotion paperwork. The guildmaster was also very surprised that his sister wanted to marry a young boy like Cain. But after meeting him today, he felt very reassured. He even told Cain to be sure to pamper Tefana in the future, as she was a very mischievous younger sister. Meanwhile, the gods were very worried because Cain was too strong. However, the creator god hoped Cain would become even stronger because his true opponent was about to appear. An entity that had been sealed 300 years ago would return to destroy the world. Furthermore, he had also arranged for Cain a new master to train his powers. The next morning, Cain had just woken up when the maid, Sylvia, rushed into his room in a panic, because today was Cain's entrance exam for the Magic Academy and she had forgotten to wake him up early. But Cain told Sylvia not to worry about it, could just teleport to the academy in an instant. Cain then went to get his exam number and enter the examination hall. When he entered the room, he saw that Telestia and Silk were not there. They must have been taking the exam in a different room. The teacher then distributed the exam papers to the students and announced that they all had 2 hours to complete it. Because Cain had knowledge from his previous life, he finished in just half an hour. Even the teacher was surprised. But Cain was very confident in his work and did not need to check it again. And with that, the written portion of the exam was over. Next up was the practical exam to assess each student's magical ability. Their task was to use magic to hit the targets. The teacher told them to use their magic freely, as the area was protected by a strong defensive barrier. The other students then used only very small fireballs to launch at the targets. Cain initially planned to use a massive inferno, but decided he should probably hold back so as not to scare them. However, the magic he used still made the teacher panic. The result was that with a single shot, he pierced through the barrier and destroyed the wall behind it. Cain put on an innocent face, but everyone around him could only stare with their mouths agape. The teacher had to run outside to see if he had hit anyone. The next exam was swordsmanship, and the proctors would be high-ranking adventurers. Cain recognized Claude among them, but he wanted to hide his skills and not fight him. However, Claude was the head proctor for the exam, so if he refused, he would be failed immediately. Cain had no choice but to pick up a sword and spar a few rounds with Claude because their speed was too fast. The other students could not see anything. Claude no longer cared that Cain was a student and also increased his speed to fight him. Nearby, a teacher told them to stop because the students were so scared they were about to faint, seeing how strong Cain was. The teacher disqualified him from the exam and told Cain to go home. He was to come back when the results were announced. Knowing Cain had finished his exam, the maid Sylvia was overjoyed, but because he had not eaten anything that morning, Cain's stomach started to rumble. Sylvia went to prepare a hearty meal for him. The next morning, Cain had to go to the king to be questioned because he had accidentally destroyed the Magic Academy's barrier. Cain said he only used basic magic, but the wall was destroyed anyway. But the king and the others were still very annoyed, so he promised not to be so reckless again. The king then asked Cain why he did not take the exam with the princess and the lady. It was only then that Cain realized he had gone to the wrong south gate to register. Although Cain knew that the south gate was for commoner students and the north gate was for nobles, he still foolishly went to the wrong one, leaving the king and everyone else speechless. On top of that, the headmaster had also gone to Duke Eric to report that there was a commoner student who had scored perfectly on the exam. Not only that, he had also destroyed the training grounds and fought on par with a rank adventurer. As soon as he heard this, Eric could not help but laugh, because it could only be Cain and no one else. The headmaster then presented the repair and construction fees, and the prime minister would have to pay for him. The king then told Cain to be more careful in the future and not to cause trouble like this again. Shortly after, Cain went to the academy to check his exam results, and of course, the top student of this year's academy was Cain, followed by Celestia and Silk, respectively. But Silk told him that the princess was very angry because he did not show up that day. Before Cain could figure out how to apologize to the princess, he unexpectedly ran into his older sister. Since it had been a long time since she had seen her little brother, she had to run over and give him a hug. She told Cain that because he was the top student, at the opening ceremony, he would have to give a speech in front of the whole school. He really wanted to give the honor to Celestia, but he knew it was not possible. At home, the maid Sylvia was very worried about Cain, not knowing how his results turned out. But when Cain came home and told her he was the top student, she was overjoyed. Sylvia decided to throw a big party to celebrate. The next morning, Cain went to the academy to attend the opening ceremony. His parents came with him, along with the two girls, who never wanted to leave his side. Witnessing such a lucky young man like Cain, the others could not help but feel envious. A moment later, the headmaster began the opening ceremony and called Cain up to speak. As he was the top student, he started by admitting that on the day of he had gone to the wrong room, leaving his parents speechless. But Cain was still very grateful to the academy for overlooking his mistake, and from now on, he would make friends with everyone here, so he hoped they would help him out. Although he had finished his speech, Cain was not allowed to return to his seat because the king had unexpectedly come to attend the opening ceremony, and he announced to the whole school that he hoped the students would continue to strive hard and not become a troublemaker like young Cain here. After getting a few smacks from the king, finally Cain returned to his classroom. The homeroom teacher entered the classroom shortly after and had the students choose their majors. Before starting class, Cain immediately chose the adventurer course, but the two girls would not allow it. Because he was a noble, Cain had to choose another, more aristocratic subject. As for Celestia and Silk, they both chose subjects like commerce and politics, so that when they grew up, they could rule this country with Cain. After the first class, Cain saw the same noble boys from before bullying Parma, his childhood friend. Because she was a commoner, she was being intimidated by these boys, and when Cain arrived, they were startled to realize that Parma was an acquaintance of his. Although Cain was a baron, the leader was still not afraid, and threatened to continue bullying her in the future. Just then, Silk and Celestia, who were behind them, had heard everything they just said. The boys became extremely scared, and knelt down to apologize to the princess. Then they turned to apologize to Cain and Parma before leaving with a very pathetic look. Cain then apologized to Parma for being late. Parma was very happy to see Cain again, but they were not in the same class. Seeing Cain being friendly with another girl, the princess and the lady could not help but feel jealous. They made Cain kneel in one spot and chatted cheerfully with Parma. Just then, Cain heard a strange voice coming from somewhere. The voice told him to come to the school library so they could meet, but when he got there and opened the door, he was teleported to a completely different place. It was a strange room, and the young man making coffee was a very special person. His name was Yuya. He was also the first king of this world. And just like Cain, he was also a reincarnated person from the old world. Cain was so scared He thought he was a ghost, so he had to use his appraisal skill to check. As soon as he opened the status window, a title appeared, Creator God. Seeing Kane's confusion, Yuya explained that 300 years ago, he had created the world where the two of them were currently standing, and the reason he had invited him today was that the old Creator God had asked him to teach him. Kane was very puzzled. He was already so strong. What else was there to learn? But when he sparred with Yuya, he was still a level below him. Just then, Yuya told him that a very dangerous enemy was about to appear. He was the one who, 300 years ago, had spread terror throughout the world by planting a prophecy in people's subconscious, causing them to start doubting and turning on each other. That person was the evil god, Aaron, and he had been sealed by Yuya and his comrades 300 years ago. But now, the seal had weakened, and he was about to break free. As for Yuya, he had already become a god, so he could no longer fight him. Therefore, he was entrusting everything to Kane. Hearing this, Kane felt as if this god was trying to shirk his own responsibilities. Yuya then promised that he would tell Kane a secret about his past life, on the condition that Kane first passed his training. Although Kane really wanted to know what it was, Yuya gave him a compass and told him that 1 year here was equivalent to just 1 day in the real world, so he could train as much as he wanted. Currently, Kane's level was only 300. His mission was to try to reach level 600 in order to be able to defeat Aaron. Yuya then teleported back to his mansion, leaving Kane behind. From then on, Kane diligently dealt with monsters to level up, losing all track of time in the outside world. The girls were very worried because after almost a whole day, they had not seen Kane at school. The maid feared that Kane was being held captive or had been taken by someone, but Princess Celestia was not worried at all and would stay at Kane's house to wait for his return. As for Kane, he had been dealing with monsters here for several months. His body was exhausted, as he had not had a single good night's sleep, but Kane still forced himself to take one step at a time to quickly complete his mission. As his consciousness was fading, Kane came across an injured wolf, but Kane had no strength left to save the wolf. He decided to end its suffering. As he raised his sword, Kane suddenly remembered the person he used to be. He was a kind person who always helped others, and now he was about to harm an injured wolf. Kane used all his remaining magical power to cast a healing spell on it. Afterward, Kane was so exhausted that he passed out. The wolf stayed by his side to protect Kane until he woke up, and when Kane awoke, he was very touched because they were both lonely souls. He decided to become friends with this wolf. Kane named it Haku, and from then on, the two were always together. Even when dealing with monsters, the two fought side by side. Before they knew it, 4 years had passed. Kane was now older, and he had finally found his way back to Yuya's mansion. Seeing that Kane had a new companion, he told him it was a divine beast, a Fenrir. Following his master's advice, Kane made a pact with Haku, and now, he only had to say summon Haku to call his companion to fight alongside him. But Kane's training was not over yet, because he had a new master named Dolan, Yuya's comrade. The two then went to train together, and Kane, after taking just one punch from Dolan, passed out on the spot. When he woke up, Kane found himself and Haku in a strange place. It turned out this was Dolan's house, and this woman was his wife. It was now time for lunch, so she had prepared a meal to invite Kane. It had been 4 years since Kane had eaten such delicious food, so he felt very happy. Seeing that Kane was still not full, the husband and wife of the house also shared their food with him. Back at Kane's house, the princess and the lady were being taught how to bake by Sylvia because they really wanted to make something delicious for when Kane returned. As for Kane, he was still diligently training his physical strength with Dolan, so much so that every day he returned, Kane was in a state of exhaustion. After a year of training, Kane had improved a lot. He then thought back to the secrets that Yuya had told him before, that initially, Aaron was the god of games of this world, but then he had used his power to force innocent people to participate in a death game. Therefore, Aaron had been exiled from the world of the gods. However, when he was resurrected, the death game would resume, and the people would be dragged into that game again. Previously, Yuya had been unable to protect his comrades, and coincidentally, they were Kane's parents. In his old world, the three of them, Yuya and Kane's parents, had been accidentally summoned to this world, and the gods had given the three of them a mission to find a way to seal Aaron into the orb they had created. However, Yuya's group was completely unable to fight against someone as strong as Aaron. Cain's mother perished immediately after being hit by his arrows. As for Cain's father, he used his own body to rush forward and hold Aaron's hands, creating an opportunity for Yuya to use the orb and successfully seal Aaron. And when Cain learned of his parents' sacrifice, he became stronger than ever before. Cain finally broke Dolan's sword and officially won against him. Dolan told Cain that his training was now complete. Cain then returned to Yuya's place to visit his parents' graves. Yuya told him that Cain's parents were always worried about him. Even though the battle with Aaron was about to take place, they still tried to find a way to return to the old world. Cain was very moved and thanked his parents. Next, he thanked Yuya for fighting alongside them. Yuya then invited Cain to stay for a cup of coffee. But now, he was eager to return to his own world. Yuya used his magic to return Cain to his original form, as he had been here for 5 years, and before he left, Dolan also gave Cain the dragon to be his companion. Yuya, on the other hand, gave Cain a sword and asked him to give it to the king. Cain returned home after being missing for several days. When the girls saw that Cain was safe, they were overjoyed, and to welcome Cain, they had made a lot of cookies, knowing that it was his favorite. Cain ate with tears in his eyes, happy for the affection the girls had shown him. The next morning, Cain went to see the king to inform him that he had just met the first king, Yuya. He then took out the sword that he had asked him to give to the king. Cain also told him that for the past 5 years, he had been actively training day and night and dealing with monsters. Hearing this, the king found it extremely unbelievable, as he had only been missing for a few days. As for Cain, he was so afraid of the king that he did not know where to begin explaining. Just then, Duke Eric reminded Cain that he had forgotten to accept the quest for a rank promotion at the Adventurers Guild. He hurried over there. If he was late, they would not let him rank up. When he went to see the guild master, he told him that for the past few days, Tefana had missed him dearly, and luckily for Cain, today was the last day to accept the quest, so he was not late. And the mission the guild master gave him was to suppress a group of bandits. There were 10 of them, and they often appeared on the road leading to the capital. For someone as strong as Cain, catching them would be very easy. Afterward, he immediately teleported to where they appeared. After searching around, he saw the men surrounding a group of people. Cain landed, and coincidentally, it was Millie and Nina who were protecting Parma's father. Seeing that Millie was injured, Cain immediately used healing magic on her, and for the crime of injuring Millie, Cain did not forgive them. He rushed forward and took down the bandits one by one. And even if they all rushed him at once, Cain easily put them all on the ground. After tying them all up, his 2 tutors asked why Cain was there. He showed them his gold adventurer's card and told them he was on a quest for a rank promotion. This surprised the 2 girls because Cain was only 12 years old, but his rank was already higher than theirs. The 4 of them then brought the bandits back to the capital, to the amazement of the citizens. Parma was also very happy that her father was safe. Parma thanked Cain because although he was a baron, he still worked very hard. Seeing that Cain had become a baron, Millie was even more surprised. She could not believe the little boy she had just taught was now all grown up. Cain then said goodbye to everyone to go to the Adventurers Guild with his 2 tutors. When they arrived, he gave Lisha the confirmation slip for completing the bandit capture quest. Just then, the same troublemakers from before appeared to bother his 2 tutors, and when they saw Cain, they were extremely startled and did not dare to cause trouble anymore. At the same time, Claude and his wife had just returned from a quest. What a coincidence! Cain's tutor, Millie, was also Claude's younger sister, and to celebrate this reunion, Claude suggested the whole group go out for a big round of drinks. Millie then recounted how she had coincidentally met Cain while protecting someone, and with just a few moves, the bandits were all on the ground. Nina mentioned that Cain had just reached a rank, but Claude was not very surprised by his strength, because last time, Cain was able to fight on par with him without even using magic. Tutor Millie, hearing this, then asked Cain why he was so strong. But Cain could not tell them that he had been taught by the gods. He could not let them know. Millie added that Cain had given her and Nina each a magic bag, and Nina said that it could even fit a whole mansion inside. Lina, hearing this, really wanted Cain to make one just like it for her. Because she was drunk, Cain promised he would make one for her, which made Lina very happy. She hugged Cain even tighter than she hugged her own husband. Just then, Cain suddenly remembered that he had not shown his face at school for 5 days. So now, he had to say goodbye to everyone and go there. Before leaving, Lina also wanted to hug Cain, but he quickly escaped. However, the receptionist Leisha told them that the adventurer group assigned to teach Kane's class had been injured and needed a replacement, and so Claude offered to take their place and teach Kane's class. Kane's first class was magic. The students' task was to shoot their best magic at the targets, but the teacher did not let Kane participate because his power was too overwhelming and she was afraid he would destroy the barrier like last time from a distance. Claude watched. Looking a bit worried, he was afraid that Kane would be ostracized by his teachers and classmates. They decided to do something to help him. The next classes would be taught by all four of them. Before class started, Claude told the students to take out their adventurer's cards and put them on their desks. Only Kane did not dare to take his out because his was a gold card. Kane asked Claude to let him off because if he took out the gold card, it would attract the attention of the whole class. But Claude kept teasing him, so Kane had to say he had forgotten it. Seeing that Kane could not get along with the class, all four of them were very worried. They decided to use a new tactic. The next class was swordsmanship and magic. Kane had been looking forward to this class because he could finally get some action. But each student took up their sword to fight Claude, while Kane could only watch. And in the magic portion, Kane was not allowed to participate either. It turned out the four's plan was to let the students see their skills first, and finally, they would let Kane fight to show off in front of the class. When they saw Kane's strength, the students would surely hail him as a hero. Kane's hands were itching for a fight, but it was not his turn yet. But when it was his turn to show off, the bell suddenly rang, signaling the end of class. So now, all Kane could do was cry. What else could he do? And this big brother Claude did not help Kane at all, but instead made him a laughingstock, which made Kane extremely furious. So that night, he went into the monster forest to vent his anger. Whether it was dragons or serpents, a single wave of his hand was enough to make them disappear. He then unleashed all his magic into the sky, making the soldiers think a demon lord had appeared in the forest. The townspeople, seeing this, hurriedly prayed. His father, on the other hand, rushed straight to the edge of the forest to see what was happening. As for Kane, after he was done, he teleported straight home. When Kane's father arrived and saw the familiar scarf, he also recognized the culprit as his troublemaking son. The next morning, Kane returned to the king and was informed by him that, yesterday, a demon lord had appeared in the monster forest, and he had freely unleashed his magic, causing an entire area to be destroyed. Since Kane was an apostle of the gods, the king asked him if he knew anything more. But Kane answered with a fearful expression. Looking very suspicious, the king immediately understood and began to interrogate him. Meanwhile, the evil god Aaron had broken free from his seal. He began to regain a part of his body, and this would be the time when Aaron would spread fear among humans and gods alike. Kane's class was having a lesson on summoning magic. Since this was not offensive magic, the teacher allowed Kane to participate in the class, and the specialized teacher for this subject, Grad, a mage from the capital, told the students that summoning magic consisted of two types. One was to make a pact with a pre-existing monster, and the other was to make a pact with a monster summoned from a magic circle. Although Kane already had two pets, today he would learn how to make a pact with a monster from a magic circle. The other students could only summon very small animals. The largest was a beast of prey, summoned by this flat-haired young man, but it immediately vanished because he did not have enough magic to make it obey. Just then, the teacher called on Kane to show what he could do. Kane followed the teacher's instructions and poured a lot of magic into his magic circle. But as he was summoning, the teacher felt something was wrong, and the result was that Kane had summoned the demon lord of this world. As soon as Kane heard the words demon lord, he used a light spell to blind everyone there. He had never expected that he would summon such a powerful character. He could even use appraisal to examine Kane's status. He then stepped towards him with a rather dangerous expression, but then immediately prostrated himself on the ground. It seems after using appraisal, the demon lord also knew he was an apostle of the gods, so he wanted to make a pact with him immediately. Even Kane did not expect things to turn out this way. The demon lord then introduced himself as Set and told Kane that, whenever he wanted to destroy this kingdom, he just had to give the order. When the demon lord disappeared, Kane hurriedly explained to the teacher that it was just an ordinary demon soldier. But the teacher knew full well that it was the real demon lord. Afterward, the troublemaker Kane was summoned by the king to be questioned. And in front of the king, he could no longer lie. Kane had to admit that at school, he had summoned the demon lord. This left the king and the others there speechless. He was afraid that the demon lord would occasionally go on a rampage and try to destroy this nation. And although Cain had already made a pact with the demon lord, the king was still very worried. Just then, Cain's teacher wondered how much magical power he had to be able to summon the demon lord. Cain showed them his status window, and everyone was once again shocked to see that he had the new title of demigod. Seeing this, the teacher immediately knelt at Cain's feet, realizing he was a god in human form. The king, on the other hand, had to beg Cain not to destroy his nation. Seeing the king's anxiety, Cain had to reassure him that he only wanted to be Cain, as he was. The king then told Grad to keep everything that had happened here a secret, then announced to Cain that he would be promoted to Viscount. At that point, Cain would choose a town to govern and protect, and the king also saw this as a test, so that one day, he could rule this country. The maid Sylvia was very happy that Cain could now govern a whole territory, but as she was about to prepare a celebratory feast, the butler came to inform him that his older brother had just sent a message that in the forest near his home, monsters were appearing in large numbers. When Cain arrived, he saw the townspeople were afraid and leaving the town, and when he returned home to meet his brother, Jin, he also learned that for the past 2 months, many adventurers in the forest had been attacked by monsters. He was afraid that if this continued, the monsters would swarm into the town. Like many years ago, Cain said that he would personally go into the forest to investigate. His brother argued that as a noble, he should not do that, but Cain showed him his adventurer's card. Besides, he had even defeated a large dragon, so he told him not to worry. Cain then went to the Adventurers Guild and met the receptionist, Judy. Again, he reported that he was about to go into the monster forest to investigate, having learned that many had been attacked by monsters. Just then, Cain met his 2 tutors again, and Nina told Cain that recently, the guild had been sending many high-ranking adventurers to the monster forest. It seemed the monsters had become stronger and very ferocious, so now, to go there, one had to go in a group. Millie was waiting for her brother, Claude, to arrive so they could go together. However, Cain wanted to go in alone to scout first. He said goodbye to everyone as soon as he entered the forest. Cain immediately summoned his 2 pets. However, they were jealous of each other because they both loved their master. Just then, Cain felt some kind of monster observing him from afar. He dealt with the surrounding monsters to see which one it was, but after searching for a while, he could not find it. Cain summoned the demon lord to ask for his help. When the demon lord appeared, he was quite aggressive, but when he saw Cain, he became as obedient as a puppy, and immediately, the demon lord sensed that there was a very strong entity in this forest. That is why high-level monsters were flocking here to approach it. Hearing this, Cain was very worried, afraid that they would swarm into the town. Seeing this, the demon lord suggested that he would summon someone who was very good at investigation. It was one of his 4 heavenly kings, named Dharmetia. As soon as he saw Cain, the old man Dharmetia immediately knelt repeatedly. Realizing he was an apostle of the gods, Cain had no time for pleasantries. He urged everyone to quickly investigate. Dharmetia used his special ability to summon bats. They stirred up the whole forest, causing the monsters to crawl out of the ground. Cain immediately rushed forward and finished them off one by one, to Dharmetia's admiration, because now he had witnessed with his own eyes the power of an apostle. Luckily, Cain was an ally. Otherwise, he would have been vaporized as well. Cain then brought the pile of monsters he had just dispatched back to the guild, and when everyone saw that these were all formidable monsters, they were extremely worried, because if they were to swarm out, this town would be flattened. As for Dharmetia, he had found the one lurking deep inside this forest. He sent a threat that no one was allowed to come near him, but the demon lord and his subordinate were not afraid of this guy. He went deep into the forest to meet him and see who he was. Aaron saw that the people approaching him were not people of the gods. He released a lot of monsters, causing the demon lord to have to use teleportation, and then returned to Cain's side. He reported back to him that inside the forest, the monsters were about to swarm out. Hearing this, Cain asked Claude and the others to stay in the town to defend it. He and the demon lord would go straight to the forest to meet Aaron, but as they were setting out, they met Tefana riding up on her horse. Since it had been a long time since she was near her husband, she had to hug Cain a few times before she could bear it. Cain said that he had to go into the forest right now, and asked Tefana to stay here to protect his house. Tefana immediately accepted, because it was a wife's duty to look after the house when her husband was away. Cain and the demon lord immediately rushed to the monster forest. There, Dharmetia was freely dispatching dragons and waiting for Cain to return. When Cain arrived, He also unleashed continuous infernos to attack the monsters crawling on the ground, and Cain also realized that the opponent waiting for him ahead was the evil god. Aaron, the demon lord, told him to go to him first. He would stay here and summon more subordinates to hold back these monsters. Hearing this, Cain was reassured and headed straight for Aaron. Back in the city, Typhana was guiding the citizens to evacuate, but Millie was very worried about Cain, so she wanted to go out and help him. Claude could not stop his sister, so he and the others also went to the battlefield. The demon lord had summoned many more of his subordinates to the scene. When they asked, the demon lord said that someone had asked him for a favor. Hearing this, the others wondered who would be so bold as to ask the demon lord for a favor. But when they heard from Dharmetia that the person was a demigod, and that he had made a pact with the demon lord, the subordinates were speechless. And after receiving the demon lord's mission, they all fought together. As for Cain, he continuously unleashed infernos to clear a path, and just then, a magic attack from afar blocked Cain's inferno. It was the evil god, Aaron, who was temporarily borrowing the body of a black dragon. Although he had only recovered a part of his body, his power was immense. Aaron continuously unleashed magic to make his monsters stronger. Behind them, the demon lord's army could not clear out the pile of monsters, as they were too numerous and ferocious. It seemed they had to ask for help from Claude's group behind them. Lina, using her magic detection, reported that the monsters were getting very close. She and Nina stayed behind to cast spells so that Claude and Millie could go fight. Although they had been fighting for a while, the monsters were still very numerous, and to encourage everyone, Lina suggested that, after the fight, they would all go for a big round of drinks. But after a while of fighting, Nina had almost run out of magic. Seeing the critical situation, Nina told Claude and his sister to run first to save their lives, but Claude could not let his wife and comrades perish here. He and his sister, Millie, would fight to their last breath, but luckily for them, Typhana arrived just in time to help. Because the defenses in the town were all set up, Typhana decided to go to the battlefield to fight alongside everyone. The evil god, Aaron, realized that it was Cain's parents who had sealed him long ago. Aaron became very angry and attacked Cain continuously. His attack was so strong that his own monsters were also burned to a crisp. Immediately, Cain, unafraid, unleashed an inferno to block him. Seeing that his body was unharmed, he decided to use even more magic. However, before he could attack, Aaron counterattacked first. He had to fly around to dodge. Just then, Cain summoned both Haku and Jin to assist him in the fight. Seeing these two pets getting in his way, Aaron swung his tail, knocking Haku to the ground. He then intended to finish Haku, but Jin came to shield his comrade. Cain could not watch his two pets perish, so he also rushed forward to block his magic attack, and Cain said to Aaron's face that he would use all his strength to protect the ones he loved. In a flash, Cain's magic surged, pushing his body into overload. Aaron recognized this as the same magic his father had used to defeat him years ago, and the two sides then had a magical duel. And in the end, Aaron was blown away. The battle created a massive pillar of light, leaving everyone in awe. Cain thought Aaron was still alive, so he continued to unleash all his power, and when the demon lord and his subordinates arrived to tell Cain, he realized that Aaron had been vaporized long ago. Although Cain tried to explain that there was a black dragon and all, no one believed him. Since Aaron was gone, the monsters retreated back into the forest, and Cain had returned safely to everyone's arms. They all hugged him for a long time to celebrate the victory. The demon lord, seeing this, also silently thanked the gods for sending to this world such a kind apostle. The next morning, Cain was summoned by the king to ask what the pillar of light yesterday was that made the citizens kneel in worship. He had to confess that it was because he was fighting a black dragon that he accidentally used emperor-level magic, and before that, he had also summoned the demon lord and his army to assist in the fight. Hearing these two things, the king was so scared he wanted to resign on the spot, but first, he had to reward Cain for this feat. He was promoted to Viscount and given his own territory, but because that area was full of adventurers, Typhana and the others were very worried. But for Cain, being an adventurer was a job he loved, so it was no problem. The next morning, Cain set out for the town of Gurin, a place the king had assigned him to govern, and as soon as he arrived, he was welcomed by some adventurers with the law of the jungle. But in just a few seconds, Cain had completely wrecked the arena. Furthermore, Cain taught these adventurers a lesson by taking down every single one he came across. In the end, Cain was arrested by the guards in Gurin for causing a disturbance, and the king, hearing this story, was at a complete loss for words. Cain was later released and recounted this story to Telestia and Silk. Just then, the demon lord arrived to ask Cain for help because he had been kicked out of the house by his wife. It turned out he had been unfaithful, so his wife had chased him from the demon world to the human world, and after greeting Cain, his wife asked Cain what he thought of unfaithful men like the demon lord here. Cain replied that infidelity was a crime that could not be forgiven. Beside him, both Telestia and Silk also agreed, saying that the demon lord was a terrible man. The demon lord's wife, hearing this, was extremely relieved, but she also did not forget to warn Cain that if he dared to make these two girls cry, this would be the consequence he would have to face. And the two of them then said goodbye to Cain to return to the demon world. As for the king, he was again informed by someone that Cain was building something very big in his territory. It turned out Cain had just finished designing a castle, but he had gotten a bit carried away, and it was even bigger than King's castle. This left his wives and the king at a complete loss for words, and with that, this anime series has come to an end. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel to help me out. Goodbye, and see you again next time.